guys know. And you hope you made your cheat sheets and all that. Actually, you should probably have Nate move back a seat so his head isn't right in the way of the video.
Right.
You mind me? Oh, you don't see? Okay.
Yeah, I can see it.
Well, that's right. You can look at his video.
I was gonna say you want to borrow my glasses. I don't need them. Cameras on.
Or you could sit here. But I'm trying to choose it too close.
It might be a little close. Yeah.
Anyway, thank you for coming to do that.
It's fine.
Be a little different dynamic, but not much.
No, it's
David, what is that instrument? Cool. Cool.
I play those.
Oh,
It's a Martin, right? How do you feel about that thing? Yeah, that's about it. They're not very loud. No, it's not real loud. Yeah, I do that stuff.
Well, I know that song.
that's good. It's not as open.
Yeah, I know, it doesn't reverberate.
Yeah, that's us.
All right.
I'm just telling him he's gonna play while you do the dance.
All right. So, remember, you guys, our exam is Wednesday, 2 weeks from today. Final exam. Final. Why? Yes.
Not for you, Terry. You're excused, hon.
Final exam Wednesday, May.
I said you're excused. You know, you're cool. You ain't got to take it.
He says I get an A.
Yeah. 8.
Yes. I'm recording.
Okay, what? A what? A new car. See what happens when the weather gets nice, you know? Just go nuts.
Yeah, it's true. No, they've done studies. Yeah, it's absolutely true. Heat makes you crazy.
Session.
Oh,
Next Thursday, next Friday. We said what was it, 11:30? Next Friday, not this week, but next week. Next week, right?
that is next Friday. I doesn't matter. I'll walk here if I have to, but I think my car will be fine
I
by
hope
then.
your car's fixed.
Oh, yeah. So my,
It's just the battery's dead. I haven't driven it in months, and my roommate left without me this morning.
Right before that. There's like 30 of us, and we all have to give speeches that day. So if we're late, sorry. I know you like it when people come in late because it happens every day. Apologize ahead of time.
Seriously, you have it finally, right? What you mean?
It ends at 12:45.
Wow. Okay.
Molly.
I mean, you just watch.
You're in that?
Yeah. Oh, you were there first half. We haven't
And
We
you
had
didn't even
two.
know
Now we
that
have
you're
one.
doing this? You're giving a speech that day?
Yeah. She just found out.
Oh.
That's what that smile's about.
We had a speech and a written, but because there's 30 of us, she doesn't have time for all of it.
Oh, okay.
So we're like, take out the speech, I'll do a written, but she don't
No,
like
you'll have time. It's not going to be a 2-hour long test for most people. I mean, some people, if you want to take 2 hours, it's fine. Some people take longer to take the test. I'll give you extra time. But you.
We could take the other
Can I
section
take it
of the
home?
final, right?
Was that?
We can take the other section.
Well, I was going to say, if you wanted to come on Monday and take the test, it's the
Just
same
drop it off
now.
with me. I'll handle it for you.
Like Steve's thing.
I don't have to be here at all that Monday. Not
Okay,
happening.
then you're not having it. But you, and if you want, what time does your class start? Starts at 10:30?
10:45 to 12:45.
Want to take some of the test early?
I can take it home, I'll do it.
No, I don't think that. Okay, don't worry about it. Just come when you're done with these speeches.
Well, you can be my quarter teacher. Love you.
All right, you guys. Look, we're going to go. We're actually going to have a little bit of a lecture today. These several lectures aren't nearly as, say, filled with detailed information, because what I'm trying to do is just give you a little bit of an idea of the diversity of life, because it's so, all these life forms on the planet, they're all so different from each other. And some of them are absolutely fascinating. Some of them are actually kind of scary. Some of them are sort of weird.
It's just because I didn't shower before I left.
I'm only giving you a tiny, tiny little snippet about each one. So last time, what did we talk about last time? We talked about viruses that we don't even consider, that we don't classify them in the normal scheme because they're not what?
They're not alive.
Cellular. They're not made of cells. Okay. And then we also talked about, what did we talk about last time? Viruses and bacteria, just bacteria.
And the shapes.
When I talked about bacteria last time, we talked mainly about what are classified as the U bacteria. That U is spelled EU. U bacteria. That's the true bacteria. But the kind I didn't talk about, which you're still familiar with, are the blue-green bacteria. So these guys are all classified together, the U bacteria and the blue-green bacteria. But I only talked a little bit about the so-called U bacteria. That's what I talked about. But what do you know about the blue-greens? They all do what? Photosynthesize and give off
Oxygen.
oxygen. Okay.
They're producers.
Some U bacteria photosynthesize, a few, but they don't give off oxygen. They give off something else, so don't worry about it forever. But there are some others, but they just don't give off oxygen. At any rate, so that's what we talked about last time. Today we're going to talk about the archaea, or archaea, and we'll talk about protists, but we're not talking about them because they're related. They're not related to each other. So I just try to put things into different categories. Next Monday we'll talk about plants, and then on Wednesday we'll talk about animals. And again, the idea is just to give you a little kind of snippet, as I call it, of all these different organisms, with a few things that I find really fascinating about them. And you can find other things that are even more fascinating if you want. But anyway, so let's talk about the archaea. The archaea, or archaea, are prokaryotic. What else is prokaryotic?
Well, plants,
bacteria. So up until just a few years ago, we classified what are now called the archaea with bacteria. They were just in the whole big category of bacteria. But then this guy started doing these studies on them a number of years ago. 30 years ago, probably 40 years ago. And he was studying a lot of the things he was studying are what we now call the extremophiles, those organisms that like to live in what we think of as extreme environments. And he, as a typical scientist, you want to know everything you can about these things. So when he did the studies, he found out that compared to all those what we think of as a normal bacteria, average bacteria, typical bacteria, whatever word you want to use, there were certain differences between what we now classify as the archaea with respect to all these other bacteria. For example, there's something different about the ribosomal RNA, which I'll say something more about a little bit. Different kind of cell wall, different kind of cell membrane. And there were enough differences between the archaea and the bacteria. And also the fact that the archaea's ribosomal RNA is more like eukaryotic ribosomal RNA, that they said, let's just put this in a separate category. So that's why they put the bacteria in one. Now and they use the word domain now. That's the term. So they have three big domains. They have the domain of archaea, the domain of bacteria, and then the domain of the eukaryotic cells. Okay. So in the old days, as I said, we just called the archaea bacteria, but now we don't anymore. Now, just for interest sake, and I'm not going to ask you anything about this, but ribosomal RNA. Now, you've heard of that. That's one of the three kinds of RNA. What's it used for?
To make up proteins.
Well, to make up ribosomes. So ribosomes are what are ribosomes? They're the little
factories where you make proteins.
That's
what it is.
But ribosomes themselves are made of proteins and RNA. The kind of proteins that make up a ribosome are called ribosomal proteins. The kind of RNA that makes up ribosomes is called ribosomal RNA. So that's the only place you see ribosomal RNA is making up ribosomes. Okay. So when he was, and by the way, bacterial ribosomes are different from eukaryotic ribosomes. A lot of similarities, but they're different enough that you say, hey, they're different kinds of things. But anyway, when you look at the ribosomes of bacteria, eukaryotic cells, and archaea, said, hey, the ribosomes, the kind of RNA that makes up those ribosomes, the ribosomal RNA, it's not the same in archaea as it is to bacteria, and actually more similar to eukaryotic cells. So anyway, it's just a weird deal. It's just a weird thing. So some people think that maybe eukaryotic cells and archaea had a similar ancestor more recently than they did with bacteria. So maybe, we don't know, nobody knows, but it's kind of a neat thing that they're just a different kind of organism. But anyway, some of them, a lot of them, the way that we originally thought about them is that they love these extreme environments. And I say love, meaning that's where they grow, divide, reproduce.
Thrive. Yeah.
And so they call them extremophiles, meaning lovers of these extremes. But some of the extreme environments, from our perspective, or say a typical eukaryotic cell perspective, some of them like incredibly hot temperatures, close to boiling. Some, I think, can even live in boiling. Some of those vents coming
out of that they do.
Yeah.
The
and
tiny shrimp.
And hot springs and places like that. What is it about boiling that's so rough on cells?
Change their shape.
Change shape, but what in particular? Change shape of what? It's so important for making them work. Proteins,
yeah, because
temperature will change the shape of proteins. You change the structure of the protein, you're almost for sure.
I thought it changed the shape of the enzymes.
Function. And enzymes are all proteins.
Because they won't, yeah.
So then they won't function. They won't do so an enzyme won't function. So in general, if you raise the temperature too high,
they get out.
Stop functioning.
Yeah.
But these certain, not all extremophiles, but certain ones live in these high temperatures, which means that their enzymes function just fine at those. Who's doing this? I thought it was Tori because he's watching. Tori sits here the whole time watching movies, but whatever. Where are you watching, Tori? I mean, look, Dennis.
Braveheart.
Braveheart, you're watching Braveheart. And Dennis sat next to you so he could watch it too. Jesus, in the old days, people just took notes.
They don't have to. They have me now. Yeah.
Anyway. All right, but anyway, back.
That's too. I was watching The Patriot last night, so that's hilarious.
He really is. Oh God. These guys, like the ones that love the hot temperature. That's called thermophiles. They love the hot temperature. They're hot lovers. No, I thought they love hot temperature. They don't do well at a medium temperature or low temperature. Then there's some extremophiles that love the low temperature. They, of course, don't do well at high temperature.
But I was going to ask you.
Freezing. Some of them can work at freezing, yeah.
They can work
some
in
can.
Inside of like a block of ice?
Well, maybe, yeah. Probably slowly. They're probably metabolizing.
Yeah, I imagine it's slow, but wow.
But it depends. Again, these are the ones that their enzymes and everything are working at those low temperatures. Other organisms aren't.
Yeah, mine and yours ain't gonna work.
And then there are some extremophiles that they can live at high pH.
Oh, acidic.
They would be alkalinophiles or basophiles, or some like the low pH. They're acidophiles. Again, what is it about high pH and low pH that usually is bad for most cells? Was it mess up again? Same answers before, actually.
It's
proteins. Yeah, it messes up protein structure. So again, proteins in general, or a lot of all those enzymes. So, so most cells don't do well in what we call the extreme environment. We like that middle environment. In bacteriology, we would call organisms mesophiles or mesophiles, meaning they like that mid-range of temperature, mid-range of pH, and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, there are all kinds of unusual from the perspective of like us that live in the middle range of everything. These are some really unusual environments, and they think maybe some of those extremophiles were some of the earliest organisms on Earth. As the Earth was cooling down enough to get to the point where organisms can start forming and all that. there's still some probably extreme environments. Maybe some of these are related to some of the earliest forms. We don't know. It's just a thought. Some even like can live under high pressure, so like deep in the ocean. So weird kind of thing. There's another one that, for example, that can live under the influence of high amounts of radiation. What's the problem with all the radiation? Too much X-ray, too much gamma rays. What's it do? What's it called? Too many mutations. And too many mutations are probably not going to be good for an organism. An occasional mutation here and there may not be bad. Occasional mutation might even be possibly helpful a little bit. But a lot of mutations probably not good. And when you're being bombarded by radiation, most organisms are not going to do well. They're going to die, as a matter of fact. They're going to die! But anyway, there's extremophiles. If you take my physio class, you'll get used to that. And then you'll die! I say that a lot. Because it does tend to wake people up, and even if they're watching Braveheart, they tend to sort of Oh, sorry. Just kidding. Anyway, but there's at least one of these extremophiles that can exist under intense amounts of radiation. It doesn't seem to cause any big problem. They seem to be able to, you can plate them out and grow them. They seem to be just fine. It's weird. But anyway, okay, I'm not going to say any more about the archaea. It's just that they've been studying these things in more detail, the last, say, 10, 20 years. They'll probably keep studying.
Are they all prokaryotes?
They're still all prokaryotic cells, and as I said, that's why we used to classify them just as bacteria, but now they're putting them in a separate category. And, by the way, again, that classification, classifying things is not always straightforward how to classify. And the best example of that is what we're going to talk about right now, protists.
The eukaryotic.
When they classify, so now they classify things with the 3 domains. So let's put up the 3 domains again. We did this before, but let's just do it again. And the 3 domains are the archaea, the bacteria, eukaryota. And under the eukaryota, we usually
That's where we are.
kingdoms. The kingdoms we put. I'm not planty, and I'm going to say plants. I'm just to make it easy. But we can say we have the protists, the plant. We'll say fungi, plants, and animals. Okay. So by the way, we'll talk briefly about fungi and plants next time, and then after that, we'll talk about animals. And again, I'm just giving you little tiny bits here and there where I think are kind of interesting, a little bit to show you kind of the broad range of things. But the protists, well, no, let's start over again. Animals and plants are fairly easy to identify. You could go out and you could say, here's a plant, hey, here's an animal. That's pretty easy.
So well, no, so well.
Once they started, looking at things under the microscope. So say, microscopes were invented like 1620, but let's say it's 1700s, 1800s. They're doing a lot of microscopic work. They're seeing all kinds of organisms, small little organisms, and although you can see fungi, okay, with the naked eye, but you look at a mushroom. It kind of is like a plant, seems to have a stalk, but it's not green, right? It's not photosynthesizing. So fungi, that was pretty straightforward to put in a separate category. But the fungi includes mushrooms. It also includes molds. It also includes yeasts. They're all fungi. But then there's a lot of these other organisms. I think I wrote them down over here. Algae, protozoa, and even slime molds. Where do you put these? Algae aren't plants. They're certainly not fungi or animals.
They're protists.
What to do with them? And then what about protozoa? They're not algae. They're not. So anyway, so what they did is they created a category that they call protists. Generally speaking, if you have a category, a big category, like animals, they all have certain characteristics in common. And then you start saying, okay, now then we start getting subcategories and subcategories. We have phylum and class and all that kind of stuff.
What's that say? Front of mold?
Species,
Slime,
genus,
slime,
like
But what these guys, so usually with plants and animals and fungi, there are certain things that are characteristic of them, so you put them all in the category, same category. Protists, they said, what do we do with algae? What do we do with protozoa? What about slime? Let's just make a category, call it protists, put them together, even though they're not necessarily closely related.
Yeah.
Am I making sense?
Yeah, I was gonna say
They're not necessarily related, but they're still put into one category. And it's really for convenience, just as what to do with them. I mean, you could have had another kingdom and call it the algal kingdom.
I mean, isn't
But
slime
they didn't decide not to.
slime doesn't fall under the fungi?
No. I mean, they're very different. These are different from each other, but they're also very different from all the other guys too. So anyway, the point I'm making is that it's not a clear-cut category that all these guys in this category are related. No. They're just, it's kind of a category that we can put a bunch of things together. Really, that's what
The misfit category. Okay.
Kind of a catch-all, yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, that looks like the fluid you put in your car so it doesn't get too cold. What is that? That's not. Oh, blue raspberry. Okay. What do you call it so your car doesn't freeze?
Antifreeze. That's generally green, and don't let your dogs drink it. But it's really sweet, so I'm told. That's why the dogs like it.
Depending upon how they make it. I checked.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Damn it, yeah.
so
No,
keep
they
in
have dog
mind
safe
then-
stuff.
Keep in mind that the protists, the category of protists is not,
20 years.
it's a catch-all kind of a thing. But whatever, we'll talk about them as separate things. I did say that there were well over 100,000 species of all these protists. I don't even know how many of each of these. I don't remember. But the other thing about protists, notice I put here, they're the first organisms to have sexual reproductions, which means they undergo, what's that kind of division called?
Meiosis.
Meiosis, yes!
And they make
So they're
gametes.
the first organisms that undergo meiosis. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just trying to understand. Protozoa are the little tiny microorganisms that live in soil and
Or water. Yeah.
Or water.
Soil, water, yeah. Some are parasitic. We'll come back. I'm going to tell you about it. Hang on.
Okay.
So, so let's start with the algae. And I won't say much about any of these things, just a few things. But algae, first of all, let me say something about the word. I did tell you this, I think, once before. Nothing you need to know, but just for your own interest. This is the plural of the word, and the singular is alga.
Really?
And you don't hear the singular very often, but notice the singular has a soft G, and the plural has that. Singular has a hard G, and the plural has a soft G. Alga, algae. Why? What's so funny?
I used to work for a company named Alga Design, but I don't think my boss. He didn't know that. It was an amalgamation of his daughter's names.
Oh, what were the names?
Alex and Gabrielle.
Oh, so
Yeah, and it became Alga Design, so I just started
I
laughing
don't,
my
I
ass.
don't think you knew that.
Yeah,
That's okay. Alga.
We're Al.
They're nice organisms.
Yeah,
What
no.
was sweet about
We were building cars.
But the other ones I told you about that do that same funny pronunciation change. Fungus. And the plural is fungi. It changes the pronunciation of the sound of the G, and I'm not sure why they do that. And I told you one other in your
Greek
stomach.
people.
In your stomach, there are those folds. Not that you need to know it, but unless you take anatomy, the ruga, the rugi. So for whatever reason and I never looked it up, or I don't know if anyone knows, but they changed the pronunciation of the G when you go from singular to plural. No idea why.
Aren't those all Greek?
But yeah. This is actually Latin, so I don't know why they changed it that way. Because in Latin we would say fungus, fungi. I think we would. I can't remember now. I have to think back on it. But anyway, whatever. Okay, algae. These are they're some free living single cells. Let me do this again. Some live as single cells. And some form multicellular organisms, or let's say some form larger organisms. For example, kelp, that you see in the ocean, seaweed. Those are all kinds of algae, but they're forming large structures, very large structures. In many cases, probably most cases, maybe even all cases, but I don't know because I don't know for sure. Even when they're forming larger structures, the cells are living kind of an independent existence. Now, when you're talking about seaweed, that may not be the case. They may not be living totally independently within that big, structure. But there are other algal organisms, that you look at them in the microscope and it's made of a whole bunch of cells. But if you actually took the cells apart, they could live individually. But they get together sometimes to form some kind of a larger structure. Probably helps them move around. Probably helps with a bit of protection, that kind of thing. So anyway, but all these guys photosynthesize and give off what? Give off oxygen.
Freon.
So who else photosynthesizes and gives off oxygen? Plants. Blue-greens, all of the blue-greens.
Lichen.
So keep in mind, just for interest sake, all blue-greens give off photosynthesize and give off oxygen. All algae do. All plants do. There are some regular bacteria. The U bacteria I mentioned, some regular bacteria that photosynthesize, but they don't give off oxygen. They give off other things. But anyway, but they still use the energy from the sun to photosynthesize. But all these guys photosynthesize, algae and blue-greens and plants. So, probably if I had asked you before I said anything about this, and I said, hey, where's all the oxygen come in our atmosphere? What would you say? I would say plants. And in reality, probably more than half of it, the oxygen comes from algae and the blue-greens. No one knows the exact numbers, so you can only estimate. It could be 50-50. 50% comes from plants and 50% comes from the algae and the blue-greens. But other estimates I've seen think that maybe over 60% or roughly 60% of the oxygen in the atmosphere comes from all the algae in the oceans and rivers and lakes and stuff like that, and the blue-greens in the rivers and lakes and stuff like that, oceans. So in other words, if you start messing up the oceans, you can start messing up how much oxygen there is on this planet. So that's another one of the things you need to think about with respect to how we are treating our planet. Silas.
With the rising of CO2 levels.
Yes.
Shouldn't that?
What's it doing to the pH of the water? Because the more CO2 in the air is. What did you say? I didn't hear what you said.
Well, I was going to say, wouldn't that make the forests stuff bigger?
Oh, okay. It can
If you don't cut them down, yeah.
Photosynthesis occurring, yes, but it's also getting into it's dissolving into the water and making the water more.
So the effect of the pH is
acidic.
Yeah.
worse than.
Well, it might be. I mean, I can't say absolutely.
Fish can only live in a certain pH, so yeah, if you ever had a fish tank, you know that.
Yeah, that's. When I was little, they said don't breathe in the fish tank, and I go, what? What are you talking about? But they were actually right.
Yeah, you're breathing CO2.
Getting too much CO2 coming out there, you'll get too much dissolving in the water. You might make it too acidic for some of the fish. Some of the fish are pretty sensitive. There was an experiment done by some religious people to show that praying was going to help plants grow. And sure enough, it showed that the plants were growing faster, but it turned out what they were doing, they were getting down on their knees next to the plants and praying, which means breathing on them, which means increasing the CO2, and the other plants that they weren't praying on, they'd be in the other side of the room, they call it nasty names, walk by. So there was a difference in the level of CO2. When they redid the experiment, having everything controlled, there wasn't any difference, but whatever. So back to algae. Okay, so algae. There are different colors of algae. There's green algae, red algae, brown algae. I don't remember all the different colors. Is there really purple algae?
No.
Should be.
No. Hell no. I love that color too, but it's not real.
I don't know about any others. There's at least 3 different colors, but I can't.
Yes, you
remember.
were. You said shut up, Steve.
What? But here's the deal. What's interesting is you've all seen a rainbow. So we have white light, but if it's put into a prism or going through the right angle in a water molecules, it'll split the light into the different wavelengths, the different colors that we can see with our eye. But those different wavelengths of light can penetrate water at different amounts depending upon the wavelength. And I don't remember which is which. I can't remember, but you can look it up. But different wavelengths of light will penetrate further or less far. And the algae, the different colored algae, will live at the different levels depending upon which wavelength is best for them for photosynthesis. So they actually appear, and that way they're not competing directly against each other.
So they fight for different parts of the spectrum.
So-
Yeah, I
so
knew
they
that.
actually can they live at different levels and they can still survive nicely without competing against the others.
Those guys
Green
like to
algae
really
are
scrub.
probably the
Those guys like
certain green algae, certain ones.
Boom, there is purple.
There is?
Yeah. There's purple. Did you look it up?
Right
Let
there.
me see.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
What other colors are there?
Oh, I just looked at purple, see if it was.
People eater? Is that what you're looking at?
Oh, it's the stuff in the tank.
But it's still algae.
Yeah. Still purple.
Coralline algae.
Still purple.
It's not. It may be purple.
It's still
It
purple.
may be purple.
It is purple.
Okay.
I stand corrected.
Certain ones.
But you didn't know that.
You sit corrected.
It's easy to love you, Terry.
So certain green algae are the precursors to plants, and what they think happened over periods of hundreds of thousands of years. Some of the green algae would be in the water, like the lakes and stuff, and then I should say streams, but it could be lakes or streams, and if the water level went down, some of the algae would be outside the water. But if certain mutations occurred that might give them a tougher outside coat, then they could withstand the drying out of being outside the water. And, eventually you could imagine a lot of different mutations could allow them to live outside for longer periods of time, maybe put in some kinds of what we now call roots to get water out of the soil and start letting other parts be up above to get the, sunlight and, eventually form what we call plants. So that's why they think that the plants started to populate the earth first before animals did. Animals came like 20 million years later or whatever. So but presumably the plants came from green algae. Okay, I guess that's enough on algae. Oh no, I'll just tell you a few other things I mentioned. I think in one of the labs. I don't know if I mentioned to you guys. But certain things we use algae for certain things, and in our lab when we did those, we plated out the bacteria on those agar plates. I mentioned to you that what we call agar, which is a thickening agent, comes from certain marine algae, and in Asia it's used a lot for making desserts. We don't use it so much for desserts, but we use it for microbiology for making. We use gelatin more.
Just for
Same
coagulant.
effect. Where do we get gelatin though?
From bones.
Horse hooves and things like that, huh? Horse hides and all that. Gelatin, remember, is just the most common protein in the animal kingdom, which is collagen in the redwoods. Yes. That's right. So anyway, what we use, where we use gelatin in Asia, they often use marine algae, get that extract that we call agar. Or if you like, you can call it agar. But anyway, agar, and it's a nice thickening agent. But I mentioned, I think, in the lab that other things, if you look on things like ice cream, maybe mayonnaise, bottles, and maybe even sometimes shampoos and shaving creams and that, look through all the little product things that are in it. And if you see carrageenan, you've probably all seen carrageenan at one time or another. That's a product from some alga. Alginic acid is another one. One of those is used in ice cream to keep it from getting crystallized. So you get a nice smooth ice cream to keep it in your freezer. And one of the others is used for, thickening agent, or they have all these uses. If you make ice cream at home, you'll just use cream and whatever else and make it. But when they make it commercially, they've got to make it in big batches and put it in the freezer. When you buy it later, they want to keep it smooth and no crystals. They put all these products in.
I saw that TV show.
Okay, let's go on to the protozoa.
Yeah.
Protozoa. The word means first animals.
Is that? Yeah. Okay.
But we don't consider them. We don't put them in the category of animals anymore. But protozoa. Let's put this word down. Protozoa means first animals. But I think what happened, if I remember correctly anyway, most of these move. They're capable of motion. And so, people were starting in the late 1600s and especially 1800s, looking under the microscope at all kinds of things, pond water and whatever else. And they'd see little critters that are moving in there. And they go, oh, God, little tiny animals. Well, some of the critters that were moving were little tiny animals, like little fleas or something. But some of them were not, we don't consider them animals. They're little, what we now call protozoa. These guys are little one-celled organisms. And many of them can move. They're free living. Although some are parasitic, but most are free living in the environment. They're either mostly water systems, but also there's some in soils. And they're all I don't know how many species there are. There's thousands and thousands of species of protozoa. So keep in mind, we're not considering them animals as such. We're considering them protists. But anyway, protozoa. Gosh, how many groups? I forget how many groups there are. I'm going to just talk about them with respect to their ability to move. And that's why they used to be classified. They don't classify them this way anymore, but this is just a convenient thing. So that most move, we'll say most can move. Okay, so one group like flagella. For example, by flagella, and I'm going to tell you something about these. Cilia, 3, by amoeboid action. Well, and then the last group can't move. So most can move, except on group number 4. Oh, they can't. Well, whatever. Flagella, cilia. You've heard of flagella and cilia.
Yes.
Singular, flagellum, cilium. Singular. Flagellum, singular, cilium. What's the difference between flagella and cilia? Well, internally, if you took a cross-section, looked in the electron microscope, they look the same. But for practical purposes, the difference is this, that if a cell has flagella, it usually only has, they're long little structures, and usually only have a few of them, 1 or 2 or 3, not very many. So
they're like flippers.
Flagella, like flippers. Oh, they wiggle.
Yeah.
To get them to move.
The cilia crawl.
In a sense, I guess you can think of flippers. So flagella, compared to cilia, they're longer and usually only, say, 1 or 2 or maybe 3. In other words, an organism doesn't usually have very many flagella, whereas cilia are shorter and usually more numerous. So like example, sperm. Sperm have 1 flagella. Okay, 1 little flagella. Something like Giardia, nasty little character. Giardia has, I think, if I remember correctly, 3 flagella. I can't remember exactly what it looks like. It kind of looks like this. It's got like 3. I think it's got something like 3 flagella. But typically for cilia, you have some cell that have all kinds of
hairs,
cilia all over it. A whole bunch of them. Kind of like that. You know what I'm saying? So it's not a real big deal for our purposes, but just for interest sake, if you use the word flagella, you're saying, hey, just only a couple of them, one or two or three or something like that. They're longer. But they're used for motion. You know, they can go pretty fast. You can see some ciliated organisms under the microscope. They're moving pretty fast. There's one little protozoan called a paramecium, and it's got cilia all over. Actually, it looks like a footprint. It actually shaped kind of a foot. Let's see if I can draw a foot. It kind of shaped like a foot. I'm not drawing a very good foot, but he's got cilia all over like this. And if you're looking at the microscope, it just zooms on by. It zooms on by. You know, and you go. And if you go into higher power, let's say you go from 4 power to 40 power, now it's going 10 times faster under the microscope because
Yeah, shorter distance.
So
Yeah.
because we're looking at small distance. Boom, it's gone. So if you ever want to look at these, we have a substance called methyl cellulose, which is clear and thick, and then you take that little protozoa,
You can't swim so fast.
liquid that's in and mix it in there, and then the poor little thing is barely moving through it. But then it gives you a chance to see. I mean, you would actually see these little guys. But anyway, so in some cases these things are for movement. In other cases, the cilia can be used, like they'll have a little opening. They call it the mouth or whatever. It's not really a mouth, but it is where they take in. What are these things eating on the apple?
The tiny minerals usually.
What's smaller than these guys?
Bacteria.
They're usually eating bacteria. They're even smaller than these guys. These are eukaryotic, right? So bacteria is smaller. But if they have a little opening, like these guys have a little opening, and they'll have cilia that'll beat, and it'll bring, you kind of call swirls of water, so that it'll bring things in the water, like bacteria, into its little mouth opening. It's not really like a mouth, but it's where things can come in and be eaten. You know? Anyway, so the cilia are usually for motion or for of the organism, or in some cases they say just to get food to come in, or cause food to come close. I'm going to tell you about amoebas, then I want to say something about inhumans, because we have some of these things. Let's talk about amoeboid motion. Amoebas move by amoeboid motion. All these guys are amoebas. But what is, by the way, amoeba, we usually spell amoeba this way now. The old spelling, it has a diphthong in it, A-M-O-E-B-A.
Yeah.
So that's the old spelling, and in Britain they tend to still use that spelling. We should use the other spelling.
Really?
Yeah, we tend to nowadays. It's not absolute, but amoeboid motion. If you've seen it,
It's like a jellyfish.
you have a little. Here's the cell. You know, and they tend to be fairly good sized cells. And if you've ever watched under the microscope, it's so cool because what'll happen is it'll send what they call a false foot, a pseudopodium. And let's just say here, it'll just send its cell membrane will go like that, and a bunch of the cytoplasm will come pushing in. As the cytoplasm kind of pushes out a portion of its cell membrane, and it just starts moving that way. Or it might be sitting one over here like this. And in some cases, it might be looking for food, and it might engulf it. In other cases, it's just moving. But these are called pseudopodia. Pseudopodia, and that word just means false foot. Pseudopodium would be the singular. But that reminds me, I told this in the class, I'm going to tell you something that most zoologists don't really know, but if you know this, you're pretty clever. Octopus. It's not related to these guys, but what does it mean? 8 feet. Actually,
Yes.
It's 8 feet. It's a Greek word for foot. Kus. What's the plural of octopus?
Octopi.
It's not octopi, because that would be if it was a Latin word, but it's not a Latin word, it's a Greek word.
Pussy.
So,
That was a good movie.
It was a good movie.
Yeah, it was.
well, you can say, here's the proper one, octopodes. That's the proper one. But most zoologists don't really know that. So the alternate one is octopuses.
Told you.
But this is the real proper plural of octopus, octopodes. So just so you know that, I'm telling you this. Most zoologists don't even know this. But that's okay. It's all right. It's all right. But this is pseudopod, pseudopodium, singular would be pseudopodium, plural pseudopodium. So, what about us in this kind of motion? Now, notice these are protozoa. This allows them to move around, maybe allows them to escape predators, allows them to find food, various kinds of things. Or, as I say, the cilia can sometimes beat to pull food towards them. What about us? Well, sperm have a one flagellum, that's good. Cilia. We have cells with cilia. The cells are not moving themselves, they're moving something on top of them.
Like
Where this is in your
lungs,
respiratory system, in the tube leading to your lungs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, think about it. You're breathing. Air looks pretty clean out here.
Nope.
Back in the old days of when the pulp mills were going, the air didn't look so good. Or if you live in LA, you can see the air, and that's not so good.
Honeymoon.
But in the air, there's obviously gases that you want, but there's also pollen and dust and who knows what is out there, viruses. So your respiratory passageways, all those little tubes are lined with a mucus substance. Mucus, ooh, yes, gooey and gooey and stuff. Yes, mucus. But the idea is when you breathe, the air just says whoop right into your lung. It goes into those passageways, but it's swirling around. And as it swirls around, the mucus is on the inner lining. It comes in contact with the mucus. So if there's any little particles in there, like pollen or dust or whatever, it'll stick to the mucus. Now, so there's mucus on the inside of those tubes, and then the tubes have cilia, and like a whole bunch of these little guys. Well, it's actually
like a wall.
The cells would be like this, and the cilia are all along in here like this, and here be another cell, here be another cell, here be another cell. So all these little cilia, like this, and they're all beating. So the mucus is up here, and as the mucus beats, it's moving the mucus. So the cells themselves aren't moving, but the cilia moves the mucus. It's trapped all whatever you captured from the air. Then it gets to your throat, and then you either swallow it or spit it out. Ew. Anyway, but that's what happens is normal process, and it gets rid of all this junk. If you smoke, not good smoking.
Yeah, I know.
Very bad.
That's how come I know what cilia
I wasn't
is.
telling you specifically, Steve.
That's how come I know what cilia is.
But it does. The smoking kills off the cilia of those cells. Now the question is how much smoking before they're dead. There's no absolute answer here. The American Cancer Society usually gives a figure of 5 years. If you've been smoking 5 years or longer and you're smoking a reasonable amount, there's a pretty good chance you've killed off those cilia. And if you haven't been smoking that long and you quit, a lot of them will regenerate. There's no absolute here. Those are just rough numbers and stuff like that. But if you have killed off your cilia, how do you get rid of that mucus? You don't want to accumulate.
You have to cough it out.
Yeah, smokers hack, smokers cough. So yeah, and that will bring up the mucus, and so that's what you have to do if it's not coming up naturally. So anyway, just another one of the multitude of reasons not to smoke. But anyway, I'm not preaching here.
I got my kid for that, thanks.
Yeah. Anyway, so we have flagellum on sperm. We have cilia on those cells. Amoeboid action, amoeboid motion. We have cells that move by amoeboid action or motion. The white blood cells. We have all these 5 different kinds of white blood cells. And these guys, now, when they're in your blood, of course, the blood's just pushing them around. They're going all over the place. But the white blood cells can get out of your bloodstream, they push their way out, get into the tissue spaces, and move around. They move around by amoeboid action. That's not fast.
Oh, white blood cells.
See, cilia, I mentioned the paramecia that can just zoom past you when you're looking at them in a microscope. Amoebas are slow. They're fun. They're fun to watch. They're really cool to watch because they seem like all kinds of little crystals in their cytoplasm, and you can just see it moving into the little pseudopodia. It's just really wild to watch. And I'm sure if Tori really tried, he could probably pull up some good videos of amoebas, right? You got one?
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Cool. I knew you were doing that.
All right.
Brave amoeba. But anyway, but they actually are really fun to watch. But these things like I've mentioned the cells to you before called macrophages. Macro meaning big, phage means eat. They're the big eaters. I call them the Big Macs, right?
Yeah.
And these Big Macs go into your tissue spaces and they're moving around. They're looking for anything bad. They're looking for cell debris. Cells die, release all these contents. They'll eat up the cell debris. You don't want cell debris just hanging out. They're looking for bacteria, bad guys, and they gobble up the bad guys and try to destroy them. So they're moving in your tissue spaces. So these are good guys. They're all moving by amoeboid action. So so we have cells that do the same. Anyway, meanwhile, back to protozoa. Talk a little bit more about protozoa here. For interest's sake, I'm not really going to get into all this. There are various, as I said, most of these organisms are free living. Most of them are just out there in the environment. There are few that are parasitic. There are few that cause diseases in humans. One of them, under the kind that can't move, is a cause of malaria. That's a serious disease in this world. As we said the other day, over 10 million people a year still die of malaria. Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation has given a lot of money in the last couple of years to try to fight malaria. They'd love to be able to stop all that. But there's a lot of unnecessary deaths. But that happens to be a protozoan, not a bacterium, not a virus, but a protozoan. One that has flagella. I mentioned that, the Giardia. Remember the Giardia? That's not an uncommon organism. It's in our area. We have a fair amount.
If you drink it, get it from water, right?
In our area, and you get it by drinking contaminated water, and that's water that's been contaminated by poop from somebody who has these things. And so you get a little cyst.
Yep.
You take it into contaminated water, and your actually digestive juices open up the cyst and release these little guys. And they're in your guts. And they do all kinds of things, like give you diarrhea and sort of wonderful things like that, a lot of gas and stuff, and all those sort of pleasant sort of things that we don't usually discuss. But when we adopted my 16-year-old daughter from Russia, no, she's actually Russian, but she's from Kazakhstan. She was 5. She'd been in an orphanage for 5 years, but third world country, Kazakhstan. Soviets were not good people to take care of the people that they terrorized. But anyway, so she came, she came here. We gave her all the, she went to the doctor, went to the eye doctor, went to the dentist, did all these things. But they wanted to do a stool specimen, and so when we gave them a stool specimen from her, they said she had a heavy infestation of Giardia. So he says, I want to treat it. It's just because it's a heavy infestation. He said, if you guys lived in Trinity County, you probably would all have it too. It's so common. It's not an uncommon thing. And normally, you get it, say, as an adult, and you kind of gives you some bad diarrhea and all these sorts of things for a while, but you kind of accommodate to it, and it accommodates to you, and you live with it without it causing huge problems and all that. It's not deadly or anything. But in her case, he said it was a heavy infestation, so we treated it to get rid of it. But it's not an uncommon disease. There's another they treat it with antidote. What do they treat it with? I don't know what they treat it with. I can't remember. Yeah.
Isn't that like when swimming in the water, isn't that what dysentery is?
Okay, now the word dysentery, it's a good question. The word dysentery, there are a lot of different things that cause dysenteries. A dysentery is just some disease that's causing a lot of digestive problems, a lot of diarrhea, gas, occasionally vomiting.
Vomiting, yeah.
And so Giardia would cause that would be a kind of dysentery. Yes, it'd be a protozoal type of dysentery. There's an amoeba, certain amoeba that can cause dysentery, and that's called amoebic dysentery. By the way, it's a nasty one. If you ever get infected with it, you want to treat it because those amoebas they not only cause dysentery, but they can get out of your intestines and into your body, and can cause some real damage. In fact, that particular amoeba's last name, that is to say its genus species name is Histolytica. I'm forgetting offhand its genus name, but something or other Histolytica, and the Histolytica means destroying tissue because it can get into tissues and cause a lot of tissue damage. So it's a nasty, and it's passed by contaminated water, lakes and things, rivers, that sort of thing. So yeah, so then there's a bacteria that could cause it. So that's called bacillary dysentery. Salmonella, for example, Shigella. Shigella is one that causes a nasty bacterial dysentery. By the way, just to tell you, just
Irish food.
Huh?
Isn't that some kind of Irish food?
I don't think
No, that's actually pronounced shillelagh and it's a club.
Oh, okay.
I know it looks like
think so.
Shigella, but yeah.
But I was gonna, now that you reminded me of something sort of humorous that happened in my microbiology class. In our micro class, when you're doing a whole bunch of lab experiments on some bacterium over the semester, and you're supposed to clean up, be neat, take care of everything. But at the end of the semester, we always had an award ceremony. We're not having one in this class. We used to have an award ceremony, and we give out all kinds of. It's all humorous, just for fun, funny things. But we give all kinds of these funny awards. Like one person who spilled stain all over the bench and herself, and we accuse her of trying to stain the world. But anyway, so the ultimate award, which you didn't want to win, was the Salmonella Shigella Award. Now, Salmonella Shigella, both of those organisms cause terrible diarrhea and all that. And so one of the instructors had some cows, and so he got some cow poop and had it in a big, all dried up now, but it's in a plate. And that was our Salmonella Shigella Award for the person who made the most mess in the class over the semester. See, so this one particular student got it. And every time we give it out, we usually give it to the lab group. And the one said, "No, it's not my fault. It's my lab partners. They never." Yeah, it's okay. Doesn't matter. You get the award. So anyway, so this one gal, she was really famous character. So her group got the Salmonella Shigella Award. And so the next year she was applying for a scholarship. And on the scholarship application, it says, "Have you won any awards this year?" "Yeah, I got the Salmonella Shigella Award for microbiology in 1989. I mean, no one else knew what that was for, so it sounded good. Most people don't know what Salmonella Shigella.
I mean, do you think that they called to check to verify? They're like, "What is this award? Sounds great. I want one."
So she got her scholarship. At any rate, what was I going to say? Oh, there is an STI, sexually transmitted disease caused by a flagella, a protozoan that is flagellated, and it's trichomonas. And so the drug that they use against it is named Flagyl, and it's because it's hitting an organism that has flagella. That's how they name that drug. It turns out that same drug is very useful against all kinds of bacterial diseases too. Kind of surprising because it was developed. Is this your mouse?
Yeah, sure is. Thanks, Ralph.
It's sort of interesting because the drug was designed to treat a protozoal infection, but it does have some effect against some bacteria, and those aren't related organisms, so it kind of surprises if you work against it. Oh, what are some other things? I mentioned that there's amoeba that causes amoebic dysentery. That's nasty. And then as far as the ones that can't move, I mentioned malaria. That's the disease. African sleeping sickness is caused by a protozoan. I'm trying to think of some other diseases you've all heard of African sleeping sickness, I assume. Nasty diseases, not nice things. Anyway, those are protozoa. Okay. Very brief idea of that. Let me say something about slime mold, because slime molds, this term for it sounds worse than what they are. They're actually fascinating little organisms. Biologically speaking, they're fascinating because of the way they do things, and here's the deal. Here is the deal. Slime molds. These are free-living little organisms that live. They're in we have them in the forests and things like that. They're not uncommon, but they're free-living little organisms that move by amoeboid action. Okay, so these are free-living cells. Move by amoeboid action. Okay, and so they're in the forest, they're walking along, Sorry. Amoeboing? No. Anyway, they're moving by amoeboid action on the forest floor, and they're eating bacteria and probably, junk that's from decaying stuff, I suppose. I don't know what they're eating, but they're eating all kinds of things. And something happens. Maybe that they run out of food, maybe something else in the environment, but suddenly a signal goes out. Talk about the signal in a second because it's not totally clear what the signal is. But so here are all these little amoebas, amoeboid type cells. They're not amoebas, but they're all living on their own. A signal goes out, and then they start to aggregate. And they come together, and they form what they call a slug. It's not the same as our normal kind of California or Humboldt County slug. But they form what they call a slug. It's about this size, not very big, but it looks kind of like a little slug. So let's say where a signal, if a signal is given,
And the signal is a response to a threat.
probably a threat, maybe environmental kind of threat, or lack of food. Or something like that. I mean, it could be maybe acidic condition. I don't know. I mean, usually they say it's from lack of food, but I think it's more than just that. But it could be other things. I don't know. So, and I'll talk about the signals. I said just like if a signal is given, they join together. Now, join together. The they part could be as many as 100,000 of these little guys. I'm not just talking about 5 or 6 or 12. I'm talking about thousands who get together. They'll join together and form what we call a slug. I'm going to put the word slug in quotation marks. To form a slug. Okay. And this slug can kind of move around. And at some point, for some reason, again, some signal, the slug stops and puts up a little thing. It's only I'm talking this high because I'm talking a little organism here. And they call it a fruiting body. So they join to form a slug. Then a fruiting body forms and releases spores that presumably will be carried away by the wind, or if there is any wind, and then those spores will land somewhere else and form into individual free living cells again. I want to stop and say the thing about this. Of course, if you're thinking from these guys' point of view, you're hoping the new location has food, or if there was some environmental threat there away from that, that's the idea. But then in a new environment, new place, the spores form new individual cells, new free living cells. Okay, so this is unusual. This is kind of wild. I mean, think about it with us.
They
it'd be like
asexually
if all of
reproduce.
us suddenly got together, some signal was given, and we all got together, and we all somehow were able to glob together as one bigger organism, and then we made a fruity body. That'd be cute. Fruity bodies would be cute. That would be fun, I'm sure. But anyway, whatever. First of all, I remember years ago going to a talk, and this may have all been settled now. I don't know. I don't keep up with all what's happening these days. But in those days, I said, if a signal, they were trying to figure out what is this signal, and the people actually called it. There's a signal to make them make the fruiting body, so they were calling it fruit juice. The fruit juice, what makes them make the fruiting body, the fruit juice, and then this would be the slug juice. So they were trying to discover what is the nature of the fruit juice, what is the nature of the slug juice, because it's some signal that they can give off they can't blow a whistle, So some signal they're giving off, and that they recognize and causes them to do this. They thought that one of these, like they thought maybe this signal for the slug juice might have been CO2, because CO2 is a signal in some organisms, to do things. And I thought, and I may be wrong, I thought that CO2 coming off of our skin may be attracting like mosquitoes and all that, but I'm not sure that that's the case. It could be something else. But CO2 is a signal in some cases for certain organisms, okay? Because that'll indicate that, hey, there's something living out there that's giving off CO2. But it turned out CO2 wasn't the slug juice or the fruit juice, so then they thought there were other things. They probably have all figured it out by now. But here's the other thing. So first of all, it's sort of interesting that some signal occurs, okay, and it's given off. But then to have these guys go from free living cells to some aggregate, some multicellular organism. I mean, they're joining together to do one thing, move around, and then to make a fruiting body that will make spores. But not all the cells are going to be represented in these spores. Only a few cells. How does it determine which ones? Maybe just pure chance they happen to be in the right place on that slug. Who knows? I mean, I don't know that they know. But this is a way. And see, the only thing I'm not sure about is if these cells, free living cells, can reproduce on their own. They might be able to. I can't remember that fact. But still, the fact that they do it this way is an interesting thing. Yeah. Oh, you look it up? Good. What's it say? Say it again.
I'll look up the response one, but the slime molds themselves,
Yeah.
they can solve mazes.
They can solve mazes? They can find their way around a maze?
They'll find the shortest path to food out of the
My
maze.
God, this is when they're in the slug form.
Yeah, they'll join together in the slug form.
Find a maze. To go through a maze. That's pretty impressive. Amazing. Yes. What is it? Is that Discotelium? What's his name? Discotelium something or other? What's his name? Discoides or so? What's his name? Isn't it like what Discotelium discoides or something like that? God, it's amazing I can come up with some of these things.
Really, it
I
is.
studied these years ago.
Response to stress that they do it.
Stress. But they don't say exactly what the stress is, do they?
Is it a mosquito?
Ah.
No, it's a clicker bug, man. Clicker beetles are harmless.
Throw a book at it.
So do they say they don't? But do they say what their slug juice
Get
is
her.
or the fruit juice?
Yeah, it's just
The baby one.
It's a clicker beetle.
Oh, AMP?
yeah.
Cyclic AMP. Cyclic AMP. Okay, the
See
cyclic AMP. That's a good one. The cyclic AMP makes sense. What? Is that, oh, there he is. That's a little fruiting body there. Does it say how? Is it going to release the spores or what? I can't. Oh, he is. He's going up in the air there. It's gonna. I think it goes up and just releases them. So, oh, cool.
They fly?
Look, those are the fruiting bodies. Look at that.
How long does it take?
This is time lapse, so I don't know. Does it say how much time it is?
You said it's the
Hours?
numbers,
What's it say?
years.
Years?
After years of study.
Oh, years of study. I don't know. Who is that guy? Cool.
John Bonners.
Oh, Bonner. Well, Bonner's a very famous person, yes. He's not still alive.
How did you know?
He was an old person when I was young, and I'm an old person, so he's got to be really old.
And just like his works when he was undergraduate.
Yeah, okay. But anyway, so they're a really interesting organism because of all this here. It's just so different from what you would necessarily come up with. Yeah, thank you for actually looking that up. And Tori, thank you too. You actually looked it up.
I'm watching it right now.
Yeah. You like those fruity bodies too. Yeah. I like those. I like those fruity bodies. I think the fruity bodies are really cool. You see, nothing's sacred in this class.
Yeah, really. That's awesome.
And you wouldn't let me lecture, really?
I was going to. Oh, no, I guess I wasn't, was I?
No.
I was a little bit hesitant. To have you talk about fruity bodies, yeah.
I wouldn't use those terms.
I'm sure you wouldn't.
That just makes me think.
Anyway, okay, so I don't think it's we're not going to do those fruity body things. I think we just stay as humans. We're doing fine. But okay, I think actually we can We'll stop early. This is a rare.
Wow, right?
She was not here.
I was gonna say, has anybody been like?
By the way, you guys, this is Steve. He's been making the videos, and I've been putting them onto our your website. Are you guys using? Anyone else using them?
Is if you are or if you're not, the thing I want to ask is just seems like whether you admit to it or not, everybody uses the study videos because I can see that.
The study guys.
But yeah. But if you can, as many of you that can, show up and ask questions that you have on the study session because it helps answer all the questions we have.
But Steve is the one in the other class that has been making those videos.
You people said that you stop talking.
Tough shit. I'm doing it for free. But and that's my response to that. Bring the computer. I've also heard that I cough. That's hey, it's open for comments. They just have to be approved.